listen to a lecture given by Dr. Pendleton to students on a business administration course and answer questions 1 to 6.
Hello. This afternoon I'm going to begin by outlining some of the main changes that have occurred in the labour market and in working practices over the last 20 years. One of the most significant changes has been the vast move, especially in industrialised countries, from manufacturing to service industries. Although this has freed many people from heavy and repetitive work in factories, many people find their work in service industries equally boring and just as badly paid. Another important change has been that most people no longer expect to spend most of their working lives with the same company or organisation. As a result, people set themselves objectives which they work towards, and they use the various jobs they do and the different companies they work for as steps towards these objectives. For individual workers, I think this has helped them become more independent and given them more control over their lives. In most companies, the management team has become less hierarchical. This is often called downsizing or delayering. In other words, there are fewer managers and fewer levels of management. As a result, there are not so many opportunities for promotion, and people often feel frustrated because they find themselves at the same level for many years without the chance to rise in the company. Competition from new products and from different parts of the world means that nowadays companies have to adapt very fast to changing markets, and this requires them to be very flexible. Increasingly, this means they don't employ workers directly, but employ other small specialist companies or individuals to do the job when they need them. This means they don't have the expense of employing workers when they don't need them. I believe that for workers who are subcontracted, there are various gains. They're often better paid for the work they do. They work in smaller, more human organisations, and they're able to organise their working lives in ways which suit them, instead of having to fit into the routines of a large company. Of course, the biggest areas of change have come with the technological revolution. Workers now have the chance to go job hunting on the World Wide Web, so they have more opportunities to find better or more suitable jobs. Statistics show that generally people work much harder than in the past, with much longer hours. New technologies are largely responsible for this, especially mobile phones and beepers or pagers. These things force employees to stay in contact with their offices even in their free time and at weekends. I think this is a pity, as people need to be able to relax and have time for themselves. Another effect of technological change is that jobs evolve very rapidly, and workers have to be continually going on training courses in order to remain employable. As a university teacher, I can hardly complain about this, but it can place an enormous strain on workers if they're obliged to retrain for jobs well into their late 50s when they're getting close to retirement. So I'm not sure if it's a good thing or a bad thing.
Before you listen to the second part of the lecture, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10. Now listen to the rest of the lecture and answer questions 7 to 10.
New technology and global competition have, between them, meant that the life cycle of products isn't nearly as long as it used to be. This has had a profound effect on companies and on the way we work. In order to cope with sudden changes in the market, companies need much greater flexibility from their staff. As a result, large numbers of tenured or permanent jobs have disappeared. Apart from university lecturers like myself, few people can expect nowadays to have a job for life, and temporary short-term employment has become the norm for many people. However, we have to be positive. One wonderful change which has come out of the technological revolution is the opportunity for office workers to telecommute. That is, for them to work from home with their computer and their modem. This enables them to organise their working lives around their families and cut out the long journeys to and from work, which are the bane of most office workers' lives.
Now turn to Section 2. Section 2. You will hear a flight attendant talking to passengers on an airplane. First, you will have time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you all slept soundly overnight. I'm pleased to confirm that our flight is running on schedule and we expect to arrive in Christchurch at 8 a.m. local time. That's about 50 minutes from now. I've been advised by our pilot to warn you that there may be some turbulence on our descent. So please remain seated and have your seatbelt on at all times. As you may have heard, a fairly severe tropical depression is headed for New Zealand and in fact is reaching the west coast of the South Island as we speak. Thankfully, we are landing on the east coast, where the weather is still relatively good. Wind speeds are steady at around 15 miles per hour and the sky is generally overcast, though the sun may creep out from time to time as the morning progresses. That said, when the storm reaches this afternoon, conditions will deteriorate rather quickly. Please exercise extreme caution if you're travelling anywhere on the island today. As I said, the storm has already made landfall on the west-northwest coast, and we're getting reports of high seas and very strong winds of around 75 miles per hour, with gusts up to 110 in Collingwood. Heavy and thundery rainfall is also being reported there. The Southern Alps are experiencing severe blizzard conditions, and there is a virtual whiteout on the roads. There are accumulations of up to 3 foot of snow already, so please, under no circumstances, be tempted to take the mountain road from Christchurch to Bluff. Use the coastal route for the entire journey if you must go down south. Over in the west, in Hokitika, and the southwest, in Milford, conditions are bad with heavy rain, high winds, and high seas. In fact, several tornadoes were reported in Hokitika and also in Lewis, which is slightly further inland. Also inland, on the northern edge of the Southern Alps, Arthur's Pass should be avoided at all costs. Roads are closed due to the heavy snowfall. Kaikoura has reported wind speeds of 45 miles per hour, with occasional gusts a bit stronger, but so far it has escaped the heavy rain. At present, it is windy and cloudy there.
Before you hear the rest of the discussion, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. We should be landing in approximately 10 minutes' time. Just an update for you on the weather conditions in and around Christchurch. We expect the storm to reach us by approximately 1 p.m. Town officials are closing all roads out of town as conditions are simply going to be too dangerous, with the risk of falling trees and flying debris too high. Roads will have officially been closed for 30 minutes by the time we land at 8 a.m. Passengers whose travel plans did not entail an overnight stay in Christchurch, we would like to extend our apologies to you on behalf of the Christchurch Town Council for the inconvenience caused. However, it is in the interest of safety that these steps have been taken. Those of you without accommodation should go straight to our customer service desk at the airport, where a council official will be waiting to take you to temporary shelters in the town. Those of you who are staying in Christchurch should go to your hotel and follow the instructions of staff there. It may yet be necessary to evacuate you down to the shelters as well. This decision will be made by hotel staff who are monitoring the situation very carefully. The storm has made a direct hit on the island. The storm eye is expected to arrive in Christchurch at about 4 p.m., after which a brief period of calm will be experienced. The western wall of the storm will then hit at approximately 4:30, and the extreme winds and heavy rain should have improved by about 7 p.m. All roads will be reopened from 9 p.m. onwards. However, we're advising people to refrain from driving unless absolutely necessary, as conditions will be extremely hazardous with a risk of flooding everywhere. Flash flooding is a real danger for the valley towns of the south in particular, as mountain rivers and tributaries have already swelled to record levels. High winds have already caused massive power cuts in West Coast towns, and a string of major tornadoes have caused havoc across the Midlands. If at all possible, stay in Christchurch until tomorrow morning, when the clean-up will begin. And, above all, stay safe.
That's the end of section 2. You have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to Section 3. Section 3. You'll hear a tutor and some students discussing eating disorders. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 23. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 23.
Good afternoon. I hope everything is going well. Right, we've been looking at problems some people have with eating. And today I'd like to focus on one you've probably come across in your reading. It is sometimes called binge eating disorder, or BED. As you know, I am not a particular fan of these acronyms, so I will refer to it by the alternative name, compulsive eating disorder. Has anybody heard of it?
Yes, I have. In fact, I read a case study of a first-year university student who was diagnosed with it.
Do you remember what the symptoms are?
Well, of course, one symptom is that the person eats too much, although that's true for other eating disorders as well. They also put on weight.
That's right. Whereas in some other conditions, such as bulimia, they don't, and can actually lose weight. One thing that compulsive eating disorder and bulimia have in common, though, is that the person with the condition often becomes clinically depressed.
Are you saying that everybody who is overweight is suffering from the disorder?
Not at all. What makes the compulsive eater different is the pattern of the disorder. Initially, as we've said, the compulsive eater starts eating too much. This seems to be because the sufferer finds comfort in food and eating is seen as a way of coping with problems. They don't eat because they feel hungry. Mary, in the case study you read, was there any reference to what triggered the problem?
I seem to recall that the student was suffering from stress because she was revising for exams, and she started eating snacks, junk food, while she was studying. Soon, she was eating snacks all the time, and it just got worse from there.
Yes, that sounds plausible, although compulsive eating often starts a lot earlier than the case you describe.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 24 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 24 to 30.
Anyway, once the condition has been triggered, often by constant snacking as you mentioned, it becomes progressively worse. Over a period of time, the sufferer loses control of their food intake. They become preoccupied with food, and the binge eating increases. Overeating blocks out negative emotions such as loneliness, worries about work, depression, and so on. But it is only a temporary effect. Apart from the physical discomfort that overeating often causes, the sufferer begins to feel embarrassed by their behavior. They then take drastic action to try to compensate. In an attempt to lose weight, compulsive eaters will try extreme diets, skipping meals, or going without any food at all for a day or more.
Not a healthy way to try to lose weight, obviously.
Absolutely. And of course, the person has to start eating again at some point.
In other words, it becomes a vicious circle?
That's right. Binge eating, extreme dieting, or attempts to lose weight by other means, and then binge eating again.
What are the long-term effects of compulsive eating?
As you might expect, these are similar to those for people suffering from obesity. Diabetes is frequently reported.
What about treatment?
The disorder can be treated, certainly. But there's always the possibility that the patient will suffer a relapse and start binging again.
What does treatment involve? Medication?
No. It normally involves sessions with a therapist experienced in treating eating disorders. A nutritionist will often be involved as well.
Are there any self-help organizations? I mean, organizations like Alcoholics Anonymous?
Yes, there are. And you might want to follow this one up for your research. One organization is called Overeaters Anonymous, and they have what they describe as a 12-step program to help people overcome the disorder. You can find out more from the organization's website. Right. I think that'll have given you plenty to follow up. So I'll see you at the same time next week.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
turn to Section 4. Test 5, Section 4. You will hear a wildlife expert giving a talk to a group of bird lovers in the UK about a species called the tawny owl. Before you listen, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen and answer questions 31 to 40.
Good evening, everyone. You're all likely to be familiar with pictures of the tawny owl. Because of all the owl species in the UK, it's actually the most common one. But the chances are that you're more likely to have heard one than actually seen one, as it's also strongly nocturnal. This means that it normally ventures out at night. So, what kind of habitat does the tawny owl prefer? Well, a survey carried out in the 1980s confirmed that this owl is most likely to be found in woodland. If you look at a map of tawny owl distribution across Britain, you'll only see gaps in the treeless marshy areas of eastern England and in some of the more upland parts of northwest Scotland. However, you can sometimes find populations of tawny owls in urban areas too, either in parks or in large gardens. The tawny owl shows some obvious adaptations to its natural habitat. For example, both its wings and its tail are short, which helps it to maneuver through the trees. Also, the bird's plumage is a mixture of brown and grey, and this provides suitable camouflage for when the owl perches up against a tree trunk. Then there are its large eyes. The tawny owl's visual capacities are considerably better than those of humans, and although it can't see in complete darkness, it's sufficiently well equipped to be able to navigate its way around woodland on all but the most overcast nights. Another factor that contributes to the tawny owl's success as a hunter is its excellent memory of the layout of different areas. If you combine this ability with the owl's strongly territorial and sedentary nature, most populations of tawny owl are sit-and-wait predators, you realize that it has a good opportunity to predict where prey might be found. Finally, as well as having large eyes, the owl's sense of hearing is excellent, and this helps it to locate potential prey as it sits on its perch. Turning now to the tawny owl's diet. Woodland tawny owls feed mainly on mammals, especially small ones, such as wood mice and bank voles. But they'll also take things like frogs or bats, or even fish, if they happen to be available. In urbanized landscapes, the owls seem to prey more on birds. So there are some differences there. Let's just look briefly now at survival rates in the tawny owl. Young tawny owls face a difficult time once they leave home, and 2 out of every 3 are likely to die within their first year. So, with such high mortality levels, it's a good job that established breeding pairs can produce young over a number of seasons and maximize their chances of passing their genes on to the next generation of owls. I've already mentioned the sedentary nature of the tawny owl, but it's not just adult tawny owls that are sedentary in their habits. Young birds, dispersing away from where they were born, rarely move far. The average distance is just 4 kilometres. There also appears to be some reluctance to cross large bodies of water. The owl is absent from many of the islands around our shores, with only occasional sightings in Ireland and the Isle of Wight off the south coast of England. Right, well, now I'll show you some photographs that have been taken in one or two of the...
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.